What's going on here? How did you even come across this issue of there being heightened traffic and people not knowing where it's coming from?
Yeah, well, it actually started, and we'll get into this because I was talking to a publisher who was saying that they were having trouble blocking Grok, because they couldn't tell, Grok being the XAI chatbot, because they couldn't tell whether it was a bot or not, and that made it hard to block. And then when I dug more into the issue, I saw that this is a pretty widespread problem. Scraping has been going on for a while, crawlers, bots to websites. But it's taken on sort of a new significance for websites in the age of AI when they feel, that the AI companies are taking their content without paying for it, or, replacing the visitors that advertisers are paying them to reach. So blocking bots has become a bigger priority for websites as these AI chatbots become more popular, and the sort of threat they pose to websites, especially web publishers, but in some
Right.
cases retailers, has become more important. But the actual blocking of the bots is sort of a challenge.
So the end goal is to block the bots, but to do that, we have to figure out if it's a human or a bot in the first place. Why is it so hard to detect which is which?
Yeah, and one caveat is, not all websites want to block all bots, especially with the rise of like agents. You essentially,
Right.
if you're an e-commerce site, you might want the agent to come to your site and let people make a purchase. But yeah, why it's so hard because a lot of this kind of depends on what the company sending the bot says and how they present their bot. OpenAI, for example, people told me was pretty good about being pretty transparent about their bots and, telling websites, hey, I'm coming to your site to scrape. I'm coming to your site because a user asked a question in search. I'm coming to your site with my agent. They're pretty transparent, but not all AI companies are. I think the whole agentic issue makes it complicated because, like, if it's a human asking an AI to do something, does that make it a human or a bot? That like, is it a human visitor or a
Mm.
bot visitor? But yeah, I think also a lot of AI companies also know that websites don't want them there. So if they look more like a human visitor, then they will not be detected, they won't be blocked, and then they can get the content they want, which can inform their models.
So who are the companies now that are making this an opportunity for them? You outlined a couple of the startups and a couple of the bigger tech companies. Is this a big business now, helping websites figure this out?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I kind of focus on two companies in my story, though there's many companies that work on this. One is Datadome, which is kind of a specialist just in the blocking of bots. One is Cloudflare, which is a company more known as a CDN, or sort of helps websites sort of just kind of connect with servers and deliver the content. But it also offers this bot blocking software. I actually also highlighted this company, Dark Visitors, which was started by a meta engineer, and then he quit 6 months ago to sort of work on this full time. And it's sort of more analytics for finding out what all the bots are. Um, but
Who's the best company? Who do people turn
yeah,
to most?
some publishers kind of did flag Datadome. Datadome and another company, Human, was flagged in a Forrester report as like the leader in this bot management category because they're more specialist. Um, but other publishers like Cloudflare too, and Cloudflare's kind of been very public about this. They made an announcement over the summer that like they were going to help publishers block the bots. Is it a big opportunity? You also asked, like, I think for publishers, they've said that this is like a kind of like a thing that maybe their IT guys used to only think about, like, and it wasn't that big a deal. But now, like, the salespeople are like thinking about it. Now it's like a commercial issue. And one publisher told me this is even more important than like our ad tech vendors, these vendors, which is kind of a big thing because ads are how a lot of publishers make money. So it is increasingly important, but is it a big business? These companies are growing, and they've talked about, the companies I talked to, they said they've been getting business from there. But I mean, the AI is an existential threat to their customers. So it's sort of
Mm.
like you have customers who are using you, but can they survive long enough to become paying customers is kind of a question I had. So
Let me ask you a slightly different question, which is that the fundamental one of the fundamental issues is the idea of will websites get these crawlers, these companies operating these bots, will they get them to pay for the content in the long run? That's the hope, at least. Does this reporting that you've done, does it help us answer that question at all? Or is it really just highlighting how difficult it's going to be to get those companies to pay for the data at all?
I think, I think part of the effort to do this blocking was to be able to quantify
Hmm.
how much the AI companies needed the content for publishers. So if I could, go to OpenAI, if I'm a publisher that doesn't have a deal with OpenAI, or even if I am a publisher that has a deal with OpenAI, but I want to renegotiate it, because a lot of these deals, I reported this a couple months ago. They weren't really the existing deals between AI companies and publishers weren't really based on a whole lot of math and a whole lot of like real like business considerations, because no one really knew what this economy would look like. So they're kind of just flat numbers they could come up with. So the goal with a lot of this blocking is, okay, if we can quantify how much the AI companies need us by showing how often their bots come to our sites, we can start using that as a term in deals and, saying
We
this.
actually have the number then. We
You
have
have a number.
leverage.
You
We
can,
have
yeah.
leverage.
And there's been kind of models suggested like by Cloudflare, like pay per crawl or by like pay per query. So I think that the problem is if publishers can't quantify it, it makes it hard to negotiate. Now, I talk about Grok, like I don't think we know of Grok having any deal with publishers. And so maybe, OpenAI is being maybe among the best sort of corporate citizens in this whole endeavor. And they're also the ones doing the licensing deals. So maybe the companies that like aren't showing up, you weren't going to get a deal with anyway because they weren't going to be willing.
Right.
But yeah, I think the bigger question is like, are we going to get to a world where there are standards and that's just like I the kind of the way business is done, and then all AI companies to be legitimate are going to have to show up and say, hey, I'm a bot, and let
Right.
publishers know and give permission. Or it's also very likely that it'll just become a free for all and publishers won't be able to control it. So
Great. Well, Catherine, I want to thank you for coming on. It's a great conversation as always, and look forward to talking with you again soon.